Exclusive True North polling shows that this election is too close to call. Hamish Marshall joins us on the show to break down the numbers and help us understand how the Liberals have blown a spectacular lead. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. So today I am joined on the show by True North's Hamish Marshall, our in-house pollster. Hamish, thank you for joining the show today.
Great to be here, Candice.
Now, part of having an in-house pollster is to help us make sense of the various polls out there, to help us understand how accurate they are at predicting the mood in the country during this election. But the other part of having an in-house pollster is for True North to conduct its own independent research and its own independent polling. So the first project that we teamed up with Hamish Marshall was our Ridings to Watch guide. This is 45 key ridings to watch in this election. It's an in-depth guide to helping us understand those key seats and what each party is trying to do in order to increase their share of power in the House of Commons. I really encourage you to check it out. It's a great tool for understanding this election and what the various campaigns are trying to do. Go check that out at tnc.news. There's a banner right at the top of the page called Ridings to Watch. Click on that and check that out. So that was our first major project with Hamish Marshall. And now we're excited to announce our second major project, which is this independent poll. So first, Hamish, give us an understanding of this poll, how it was conducted, and the methodology that you used.
Sure. So we conducted it September 2nd to 4th, which is last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, although most of it was done on Friday. We interviewed 854 Canadians from right across the country in both official languages, which gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 3.4%, 19 times out of 20. It was done online using a nationally representative panel, and it shows a very tight race.
A very tight race. Okay, well, why don't you let us know what did your poll find? Who are Canadians voting for if there was an election that were to take place right now?
Sure. So if the election was to take place right now, and just to emphasize, this is not a projection of what's going to happen in a couple of weeks. It's a snapshot of when it was taken, because obviously things can change. We were at the Conservatives were at 32.7%, slightly ahead of the Liberals, 1.6% ahead of the Liberals at 31.1%. NDP behind at 19.6%. The Bloc at 8% nationally, which works out to 34% in Quebec. The PPC up to 4.2% across the country, and the Greens sitting at 3.6%. So the PPC and the Greens basically tied, PPC a little bit ahead. Conservatives maintaining a lead of a couple of points, but it's very, very close. As you know, in the last election, the Conservatives led by about 1.2%, and it was still, the Liberals still were able to win a significant minority. So we're right in the thick of it.
Wow, it's incredibly close. And, this is a really different story than what we saw even a couple weeks ago. I mean, the whole idea of this election was that the Trudeau government projected that they were in sort of majority territory, and that was what all the predictions were saying. So they really have managed to really just blow a huge lead. And so can you help us break down who has shifted their vote? So what is the breakdown by region and by demographic here?
Sure. And, I think if you think back to one of the first podcasts you and I did during this campaign, Candice, we talked that the whole point of this election was a Trudeau majority. It's the only reason it was happening. And initial reports looked like Canadians were kind of okay with that. That certainly isn't the case today. There's, as far as I can tell, no scenario that the Liberals can get from here to a majority government. They can still win a minority, but a majority, the whole purpose of the campaign seems to be gone. And we're now in this situation where things have tightened up and the Conservatives are slightly ahead. The big changes are in British Columbia. We'd seen polls showing the Conservatives behind in BC. They're now at 34%, which is about where they were in the last election, but the Liberals have dropped from being first in BC or a very tight second, depending on which poll. Liberals are now 10 points behind the Conservatives in BC at 34. Wow. Conservatives continue to lead on the prairies, which isn't much of a shock. In Ontario, where we'd seen polls showing the Conservatives below 30%, we've got them in this poll at 33, only 4 points behind the Liberals. I believe the Liberals won Ontario by 9 points last time, so it's a much greater narrowing and means that the Conservatives are going to pick up some more seats based on these numbers. Atlantic Canada and Quebec are more or less similar to what's happened in the last election. But we should also point out the NDP. Part of this is the Conservatives doing better than expected, but also the NDP is cut into that Liberal vote. The NDP has definitely up in Atlantic Canada. They're up in Ontario a bit, and they're certainly up in British Columbia. So the NDP are at 32 in BC, and BC is going from what was effectively a Conservatives ahead in a bit of a three-way fight last time to really being an NDP Conservative fight. So we're seeing those gains everywhere. And then, frankly, the rise of the PPC. The PPC got 1.6% in the last election, up to 4.2 nationally. We've got them at 6% in BC, 6% in Ontario. We're seeing growth with this party. We've often seen in smaller parties that they poll reasonably well and then fall back down. But we'll see where we end up. But everything we're showing is the PPC is growing, and they're growing not just from the Conservatives, but from other parties as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm just looking at the numbers here. So it seems like the NDP is really cutting into the Liberal number. Perhaps the Conservatives are cutting into it too with a moderate candidate like Erin O'Toole. Could the PPC potentially play a spoiler? I mean, like you said, 6% in Ontario, 6% in BC. Presumably that could turn into some actual seats.
Well, we'll see. As you know, in our system, it depends how it's distributed. You can get 6% across a province and not win any seats, or you can get 1%, and if it's very concentrated, you can win one or two seats. So it depends how it's distributed, and I'm not seeing any indications outside of obviously Maxime Bernier's own riding of particular strength of PPC. They don't seem to have any other star candidates that could make it turn into seats. But the big question with the PPC is where their vote's coming from. In the last election, I think everybody would agree, maybe 2/3 of PPC voters have been Conservative voters. In this election, that does not seem to be the case. It seems to be that they're coming from other parties. And we see that when we look at some of the demographics, that the PPC is doing well with younger women, for instance. With younger women, we found that the PPC is 9% of the vote, which is where there's some of the vaccine skepticism. With middle-aged men, they're 8% of the vote. So it's cutting into other parties in a way that I think is unexpected, which muddles the whole story. It's not going to be a clear-cut story that every PCC voter came from the Conservatives.
That's right, because we even saw over the weekend, sorry to interrupt you there, Hamish, but Michaela Peterson, who's Jordan Peterson's daughter, and she's a high-profile podcaster and sort of influencer in her age group, and she came out and endorsed the PPC. So I imagine you're right that sort of demographic of a young sort of urban woman going for PPC would really sort of surprise or befuddle the sort of conventional wisdom, which is that the PPC is a bunch of angry old white guys.
Right, and I don't think that's the case anymore, and the party is changing, and where it will end up and what it will have changed into in 10 days, I think remains to be seen. But it's going to be a very different story than what their story was in 2019, and where the PPC goes after the election is going to be very interesting. As if we see protests against vaccine mandates continue, we'll see how if they can capture that or not. But it's an unexpected and fascinating turn. And I don't think we're going to see the end of this kind of activism, this issue set here in Canada. In terms of other things that are going on the ballot, in terms of the ballot question, I think it's interesting that the Conservatives are clearly winning men. In the past, Conservatives have difficulty with younger men, but right now, men under 34 or under 35 rather, are a two-way fight between the Conservatives and the NDP, with the Liberals in third with that group. It's another group that the Conservatives have done better with. The one group that's really keeping the Liberals in the game is older women over 55, who back in the Harper years were fairly reliable Conservative voters. Trudeau captured them in 2015 and hasn't let go. And right now they are his most reliable supporters. So, how different age groups support parties doesn't change quickly, but it's been evolving over time, and we're now in a different sort of environment. And what's interesting, though, is that while Conservatives continue to do very poorly with young women, with middle-aged women, it's basically an even split: 33 Conservative, 32 Liberal. So that's very interesting, and that's a key demographic. If the Conservatives can win by more than 1 point, women between 35 and 54, that's key to winning a government.
Interesting. Just one other question to compare with 2019, because you sort of did a great side-by-side of where the vote landed 2 years ago compared to where the polls are showing today. And interestingly, it shows that the Conservatives had a greater percentage of the vote in 2019, 34.3%, whereas right now, gauging on your poll, we're at around 32.7%, and yet it shows the Conservatives perhaps even being able to eke out a minority. Why is it that more people were voting Conservative 2 years ago, and that didn't translate to a minority Andrew Scheer government?
Well, it was primarily because the Conservatives ran up large votes in Alberta and Saskatchewan and other parts of the rural West, and winning seats with well over 80% of the vote, while losing much closer seats in Ontario. And the biggest difference right now, if you look at the polls across the regionally, is the Conservatives are doing not as well in the prairies as they did in the last election. That might not make a difference. That might not cost them any seats, although there are, as we've seen, there are some seats in Alberta that could change hands regardless of that. But the gap in Ontario is much closer. With Liberals only 4 points ahead of the Conservatives in Ontario, the Conservatives have a chance to win a bunch more seats than they did in 2019, when, as I said, I believe the Conservatives were 9 points behind, which means that seats like Richmond Hill or King Vaughan, or some of these seats the Conservatives lost by only a couple of points. Even if the Conservatives only get the exact same number of votes as they did last time, if the Liberals are a few points lower, they'll be able to win. That raises the big question as whether the Liberals can scare some NDPers back into voting for them between now and election day.
Right, kind of fall back on their tried and true strategy of scaremongering about a Conservative government. One of the other interesting questions that you asked Canadians in this poll was whether or not they were ready for a change. And maybe this does reflect why the Liberals have had, like we said, such a spectacular fall from grace in this campaign so far. So let's unpack those numbers a little bit. What did Canadians say about whether or not they wanted a change?
So overall, 61% of Canadians said they want to change of government. It's made up by 43%, the largest chunk, say that the Liberal government has done a bad job and it's time for a new party. But then there's another 18% who say that the Trudeau government has done a good job, but still want a new party in government. So they don't really object to his agenda per se, but they're just tired of him. They're looking for something different. Those people are more likely to be New Democrats. And that, as I was saying, is frankly a big opportunity for the Liberals, because if the Liberals can say, well, you think we did a good job, you might be tired of us, but you think we did a good job, it's easier to persuade some of those. If you already think the Liberals have done a decent job, it's easier to persuade them to come back. So that's where the Liberal campaign is going to be focusing a great deal over the last 10 days of the campaign is in that group. Then there's 30% of folks who think that the Liberals have done a good job and should be reelected, which more or less aligns up with those who are voting Liberal. And then there's another group, 9%, who say the Liberals have done a bad job but should be reelected. So these are people who sort of say, well, we don't really like what's going on, but we don't really like the alternatives. And they're obviously going to be skewing Liberal in a significant way. The overall support, views on these questions more or less follows the same as we saw with ballots. So, people in the prairies are more interested in change. Ontario is more evenly split. Older women are less likely to want change. Men are more likely to want change, or more or less follows how it's going. But what's significant about this question is, well, it seems like 61% of Canadians wanting change is enough. It's a bit of a note of caution here, is that typically, if you look historically, that number's got to be about 65% in order to change the government. And so we're a little bit lower. And if we look at where that number was in the 2019 election, it was somewhere around the same 60, 62%, 63%, 59%, it varied around, but it's somewhere in there. So what this showing is another Liberal minority, or some sort of minority. It's showing it's going to be a very, very, very close election. And it's not the sort of overwhelming desire for change. While 61% seems like a big number, typically it's got to be even higher than that in order to make sure that the change really happens.
Interesting. Well, this sort of goes hand in hand with the next question I want to talk about, which is you poll Canadians about their various impressions of the leaders. So why don't you tell us what you found Canadians view? Let's start with Justin Trudeau.
Sure. So Justin Trudeau is not as popular as he was even a few weeks ago. His numbers aren't disastrously bad, but 32% of Canadians have a strongly negative view of him, which is the largest of any leader, and only 12% are strongly positive. But he does a bit better in the moderately positive number. 34% say they're moderately positive view of him, and 21% have a moderately negative view. which means overall more people have a negative view of him than a positive one, but not a lot. It's only 7% more. So we give what we call a net impression score of -7. But when you consider that he was probably polling around even, his net impression was probably about even negative and positive at the beginning of the campaign, -7 is certainly a step in the wrong direction. On the flip side, Aaron O'Toole's number isn't really much better. In fact, it's slightly worse. It's -10. Although with a margin of error, it's really not that significant a difference. The significant thing is that before the election, he was probably, depending on the poll, was polling somewhere -20, -22. So he's seen a significant improvement. It's not that there's O'Toole mania out there that people love him, but they've certainly gone from having a fairly dim view to having a generally not a terrible view, and a view in line with where they are in the prime minister. 29% have a strongly negative view of him, and 12% have a strongly positive view. But and only 5% don't really know who he is. So that's really changed as well. And then of course, just to show that, well, it's interesting to see how people feel the leaders. People loving you doesn't help that much. Jagmeet Singh is +27. People quite like the guy. 15% have a strongly positive view. 47% have a moderately positive view. Not only between combined, only 36% have a negative view. It doesn't matter, just because 27, with all these people like him, he's still not winning the election. In fact, his poll numbers have probably wafted down a little bit since the beginning of the campaign. And it really goes to show that, like I said, Singh is people who like him. And I think even 40 something percent of conservatives, 43% of conservatives have a positive view of Singh. Not that it's doing them any good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because in some ways, Singh is non-threatening, because I think a lot of people recognize that, he's not going to become prime minister. So it's more like, hey, would you want to go have a beer with this guy? And people are like, yeah, he seems like a nice guy.
Sure.
Seems like he cares and his heart's in the right place. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean that he's going to have any chance at becoming the prime minister. Just one more question here. You sort of zeroed in on this idea of trust in Trudeau, trust in O'Toole. I mean, that's sort of key here, because people know Justin Trudeau's a known entity. We know what we're going to get with him. O'Toole was relatively sort of unknown, I think, prior to the campaign. So the fact that he has been able to improve his impression is impressive. Do you see these numbers sort of holding for the rest of the campaign, or is there any possibility for a swing after the debates going on here today and tomorrow?
I think the debates. I think the English debate matters. The second French debate doesn't really matter. The viewing numbers on it are so poor. So unless something explosive happens that then becomes a clip that's shared around Quebec, I don't think we should expect the second French debate to make much of a difference. But the English debate can certainly have an impact for each of the main leaders, for good or for ill. It's rare that debates have a big impact, but they certainly have hurt or helped people at various points. So as you said, one of the things I wanted to ask about was trust. We said, how much we asked people on a scale from 0 to 10, how much they trust Trudeau and O'Toole. And they came up with fairly similar scores. O'Toole's is actually slightly better at 4.15, and Trudeau's is 4.09. These are not particularly strong scores for either one of them, but it's interesting after O'Toole started with quite bad personal numbers a few weeks ago, that he's slightly ahead of Trudeau, and that's certainly encouraging. And we again see that the support levels generally follow what ballot had done. It is worth noting that on by age and gender, O'Toole has a lot more trust with men over 35. It's significantly more, which should be very encouraging. Him is more likely to get them out to vote, and more likely that the attacks on him will not work as well with that group. And it's also worth noting that middle-aged women 35 to 54 that we've seen in the past, and some of the other results have got skepticism of Trudeau. The group's tied in the Met polls. Well, Trudeau is slightly more trusted with them than O'Toole. It's not very much. It's not like the leads he has with older women. The one note of caution I would say for conservatives is that given two leaders that have about equal levels of trust, a significant number of Canadians are going to kind of go with the devil they know. If they sort of say, well, they're both about, we trust them about the same, they're going to go with the devil they know. And we'll see if O'Toole can overcome that and gain trust or maybe put a hole in the side of Trudeau's boat and drive those trust levels down even more for him in the remaining part of the campaign.
Well, thank you so much, Hamish. You've really tapped something interesting here and painting a picture of a very, very close election, very exciting. As a journalist, this is exactly what you want, a very close race and a lot of people tuning in. So thank you so much for this research. And again, for anyone who wants to go take a closer look, go on over to tnc.news. Thank you, Hamish, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.